Well, I'm Deena Fidas, and I'm the Deputy Director of Corporate Programs within the Human Rights Campaign's Workplace Project. And so the HRC, or the Human Rights Campaign, is the largest civil rights organization in the United States working on lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender equality. And HRC is actually more of an umbrella term for three complementary components of the organization. And this has to do with how NGOs are governed and their specific tax status and implications on what types of activities they can engage in. And so we have the Human Rights Campaign, which is what's known as a 501c4. And in plain terms, what that means is that my colleagues can actually lobby directly on Capitol Hill. They can lobby state lawmakers. They have a relationship with the administration. We've obviously had a lot of advances under the Obama administration. And so they're really responsible for that work and that aspect of the mission of promoting equality at the legislative level. Also, the 501c4 wing can do direct fundraising. They engage actually 1 million members and supporters across the United States. And what complements that is actually a political action committee, so a PAC. And this is very similar in structure to a lot of major NGOs in the United States. You know, the American Civil Liberties Union, for example, has what's known as a C3 and a C4 side. So it has implications for our tax status, how we have a financial foundation for our work, and again, what types of activities we can do. So I'm on the foundation side, and I actually have the same legal and tax status as many houses of worship or schools. So I work directly with employers on their policies, their benefits, and their practices as they impact LGBT people, and yet I don't do any of the direct lobbying. And so within the Human Rights Campaign Foundation, we have several programs intended for that wide-scale level of education and empowerment. We have a religion and faith program that engages what are known as inclusive denominations or inclusive communities of faith. So they don't do as much what you might think of as religious debate, but rather for virtually every sect of every major religion, there's an LGBT inclusive voice. So for example, the Catholic group in the United States is called Dignity. There have been many active Reform, Reconstructionist Jewish leaders who've spoken out in support of LGBT equality. So they work on that. Then we have another project, a similar scope, but called the Family Project. And so they work with healthcare providers in a similar way as to I work with companies. They work with doctors and hospital systems to make sure that you know, their definition of family as it applies to who can visit whom in the hospital is LGBT inclusive. All the way to, you know, the types of curriculum and questions that may be asked of someone who is transgender related to his or her health, or somebody who's gay lesbian. And so what are some of the unique medical needs of the community, and what are some of the aspects of what a term that's emerged, cultural competency amongst healthcare providers. So they deal with that. They also work directly with adoption and foster care agencies. And they have another really successful program called Welcoming Schools. And that's been pilot tested and actually integrated into various school systems nationwide. And what's particularly exciting about it is it's not just a curriculum about LGBT kids or, you know, bullying. This is something that, of course, has gotten quite a bit of attention the last 2 years. But it's a broader look at family diversity. And that's really been the strength of a lot of our programs, is that we don't always begin the conversation with, you know, we're LGBT, this is what's so highly unique about us, but rather it pivots it and says, you know, by recognizing LGBT families, the fact that literally some of the kindergartners have 2 moms or 2 dads, by raising the awareness of the school administrators and the teachers, will have an impact to raise the awareness that you have kids who are moving between 2 households, you know, divorced parents that are remarried, or you have children who are being raised by their grandmother, by a single parent. So the broader message is, yes, recognize the uniqueness of the LGBT community, and in the process, it will open up other doors of a fuller inclusion of different elements of diverse, whether you're talking about kids in school or the American workforce.
In how many schools do you have these?
You know, it's in several school systems at this point, so I'm not sure the exact number of schools, but it's actually been, I know, infused into California school systems, Minnesota, and I believe in some of the Northeast.
Yeah, all of HRC's programs, they're nationwide, right?
Yes.
Although you're based in...
Exactly. Our headquarters is in DC, which in and of itself is significant. We have a beautiful physical building. It's a green building. And, you know, it was not... We moved, again, thinking about the evolution of NGOs. We went from being in a very small space in DC to a slightly larger building to finally, 9 years ago in 2003, after a capital campaign, actually buying a building. And the building is just a little bit off of Embassy Row, and what's significant about that in DC is virtually every nation is represented along Embassy Row. Major organizations like the National Council of La Raza, they're around the corner. And so it really, to have that physical, exactly. It's very important. And, probably once a week, especially in the summer when I walk out of the building, there are members of HRC who are visiting DC as tourists and, taking photographs. And it's quite powerful to have the logo out right at 17th and Rhode Island, to have our flag up, and to have our mission actually printed on the side of the building. So in terms of the foundation, the only other project I hadn't mentioned before the workplace project is the Youth and Campus program. And that has really been led for a long time by Candace Gingrich. And you may know because of her rather famous half-brother Newt Gingrich. And and so Candace and her team that continues to grow has really empowered what used to be known as gay straight alliances on campus, now LGBTQ, LGBTQI. We're constantly evolving in our own understanding of the community to promote awareness on campus, to address issues of bullying, to really just make sure that college students are equipped with information. What does it mean to come out? What are the implications for my friends, my family? And they also have a successful historically black colleges and university program, which again has been really breakthrough in a lot of the new audiences it's reached. It continues to be a struggle for a lot of students within the HBCU system to live openly and be comfortable. So those are all my wonderful esteemed colleagues and their work. And then my project, the workplace project, our flagship report is the Corporate Equality Index, and we've been publishing that for 10 years. And that's that national survey of LGBT inclusion it used to be just Fortune 500, and we've really just mushroomed into a huge survey of close to 1,500 businesses. It includes now the Fortune 1000, the AmLaw top 200 law firms, and a couple of other 100 businesses that have actually reached out to us and said, we want to be rated. We want to know how we're doing with this, whether it's, for that sort of consumer aspect or just a broader sense of corporate social responsibility.
So you give like a certification or only a rate, or?
Both actually. So we launched the survey, and businesses have about 4 months every year to complete it. And year round, we serve as partners in this work. We do quite a bit of direct consulting and quite a bit of travel to conferences, to businesses, to teach them about the importance of non-discrimination policies, of equal benefits, of having inclusive practices. And the key driver for this has really been that still today in the United States, there are no federal level workplace protections for the LGBT community. And so what that means is states... Is that
what ENDA was trying to...
Exactly. Exactly, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, or ENDA. And so we're actually going to have another Senate hearing on ENDA next week. But that has been volleyed around Congress for well over a decade. And the strategy behind my work at the Workplace Project, as it was envisioned 10, 15 years ago, was, okay, part of HRC is going to continue the work on Capitol Hill and continue to change hearts and minds, move public opinion, have these conversations where they matter. And at the same time, we can't wait for lawmakers to change on this set of issues. We can, exactly, we'll be waiting for a long time.
Yes, of course.
Potentially waiting for a long time. And so instead, we will work directly with businesses. And it's not, there's a precedent for that. Right now you can pick up, Latina Style is a popular magazine, and they have a ranking of businesses every year. Working Mother is another one that represents that particular constituent of, is there work-life balance, is there flex leave policies within a business? And so businesses have been used to these different diversity designations or awards that they can get. So the Corporate Equality Index really kind of slipped into that mix of rating systems. And at the same time, it was very unique because we are an NGO. We make no profit from doing this work. We're not politicized in our work. I mean, as I said, legally I'm forbidden from doing lobbying, so I don't come to businesses with that sense of an ulterior motive or agenda. And in the process, what's happened is, even without those federal protections, at this point in time, because of our work, a majority of the Fortune 500, for example, the most prosperous businesses, have protections on the basis of sexual orientation.
Well, all of them?
A majority do. So about 88% right now. And for the first time in history, half, 50%, readily acknowledge and protect transgender employees. So they have gender identity as a designated protected class. And that's been a huge leap because just 10 years ago, that number was close to zero. So, you know, within our work, there are certain really incredible success stories, and I think the extent to which we've been able to raise the visibility and raise the sense of awareness, knowledge, comfort around transgender inclusion has really been enormous.
You're working only with big corporations or also with...
Primarily with larger corporations, because again, if you're grading a General Mills or a PepsiCo, it wouldn't be fair to have a test that works for them and the mom and pop 10-person business. At the same time, though, we have been collaborating. There is a National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce in the States, and I know that they have been expanding globally. I think they just went on a trade mission to Colombia fairly recently, so they're expanding into some of the Latin American markets. And we developed, in concert with them, a guide for small businesses. And so some of what we do is universal. I mean, every business should have an inclusive non-discrimination policy. Whether you have 15 employees or whether you have 100 or 100,000, there's no legal restriction on that. Just because the federal mandates don't yet protect this population, that doesn't mean that there's a federal prohibition on going forward and actually affording these protections.
So, first, my thought would be, which is your target in the Congress? I mean, which would be like the reform that you need, like, in the, what is exactly? Do you have in the corporations only an LGBT policy, or is it something else?
Well, I thought I understood the question as it related to Congress, but I'm not sure I understand.
Yes, the thing is, what are, which is your target? I mean, what are you trying to change in the law? Sure. Exactly.
That's a great question. I think if you had to summarize the key pieces of legislation as they impact this community at this moment in time, I'm thinking actually about what Barney Frank said at the Don't Ask, Don't Tell signing, looking at colleagues who may have seen it who are laughing, but really, and we have accomplished two out of the four. One was the passage of federal hate crimes legislation. So in the wake of very tragic, high-profile murders such as Matthew Shepard, we needed a piece of legislation that clearly articulated protections on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. And beyond that, what hate crimes legislation does is it opens up funding and formal infrastructure for law enforcement to understand and to recognize and respond to hate crimes. So that was passed after really tireless efforts of Judy Shepard, Matthew Shepard's mother, also the James Byrd family. It was a dual bill, and organizations like the Human Rights Campaign. The second was really the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That was critical for this movement, and that has happened. And the next two, again, if you had to paint with a really broad brush here, relate to workplace protection. So the passage of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. And fourth would be federal recognition of same-sex relationships. And what we mean by that is the elimination of the Defense of Marriage Act. And so that, late-breaking news, as of this week, it appears to be probably headed to the Supreme Court. What that would do is allow for the federal recognition of same-sex marriages where they are legal. So it would not mean that, should the Supreme Court find DOMA unconstitutional, it does not mean that we would have same-sex marriage in all the states. It simply means that, as it is right now, if I were to marry a woman in Massachusetts and she dies, I can't collect Social Security survivor benefits. I still would have to pay more in taxes for health care.
All the federal benefits do not apply.